thank you so much for being with us. And you know that you all know that Jonathan Dancy is a member of Archives Poincaré, which is just my personal historical triumph, to be honest. So I'm just really proud of it.
Hang on, I asked.
You did, but you know, I did all my life. I did everything to make you ask me to. Okay, so thank you again, and thank you for your audience for being here. And the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Well, it's very nice to be here at last, after several years of being a member of the group in some metaphysical sense. But it's good to come, and it's obviously a very nice place to be. So I'm talking to you today. It sounds very hard, the metaphysics of reasons. What I'm interested in here is the metaphysical structure of reason relations, or relations in which reasons play a part. This is a reason for that. What goes on the left-hand side of that? What can go on the right-hand side of it? Can a person be a reason? Can a building be a reason? Can something be a reason to fall ill? Can you fall ill for a reason? And so questions like that. What is it okay to put on the left-hand side of the is a reason for relation, and what is it okay to put on the right-hand side of? So we shouldn't put the grand word, we shouldn't let the grand word metaphysics frighten us. It's a simple question. What can be a reason for what? One might ask similar questions about marriage. What sort of thing can marry what sort of thing? Can only persons be married? Is it necessarily a two-person relation? Could it be a three-person relation? Could you marry your cat, your dog? Why not, if not? Those are questions about the sort of relation we're dealing with, the metaphysics, as it were, of the marriage relation. Which things can go in the relevant boxes? And the same applies to reasons. Which things can be reasons for, or reasons to, or one of those reasons related to what on the right-hand side? Can there be a reason not to get older? I don't think so myself. It's a bit like asking about the marriage relations, as I said. You might ask these metaphysical questions about marriage, what sort of a relation it is. What can be married to what? Why can't you marry your computer? You might think some people have already done that. So that's what I'm talking about. So now I want to move on.
Sure. Sorry.
So there are various metaphysical questions about reasons. One is, what sort of thing is capable of being the reason for which we do something? Can my cat be a reason for me to feed it? Or is it that it's not the cat that's a reason exactly, but some other sort of metaphysical object, like, for instance, my cat's health? Can that be a reason for me to feed it? Or is it that my cat is ill? That is the reason for me to take it to the doctor. Can my wife be my reason for my wife here present? Be my reason for living? Is that possible? Could a person be a reason for action? Secondly, what sort of thing could be the reason for which we believe? I'll begin to think of the same sorts of things as being parts of reasons for action as parts of reasons for belief. So so far we've got, as it were, questions about what lies on the left-hand side of a certain reasons relation, the reason for which relation. Then, as well as the reasons for which relation, there's the reason to, with a different ending, reason to, a reason to act or a reason to believe. Let's think about this reasons to relation. There are reasons to act, reasons to believe, reasons to hope, reasons to want, reasons to fear, reasons to learn. Reasons of this sort must be good reasons. And those reasons are there even if we don't act or believe accordingly. They're there whether we act or don't act. So I can have a reason to do something that I don't do. Maybe I don't do it because I haven't noticed the reason. Maybe I don't do it because I noticed a stronger reason to do something else. That's all that's possible. And of course, unlike reason for which, a reason to act doesn't require an actual action. You can have a reason to act and not do the action. You can have a reason to believe when you don't believe. So what's on the right-hand side of the reason to relation? We say a reason to act, a reason to believe, a reason to do something, a reason to go to work, a reason to have a break. What sort of thing is that thing that's at the right-hand side? This is the metaphysical question. And I'm going to say that that question is very, very hard. In fact, it's the hardest question of all the questions I'm asking today. Nobody knows what a reason is a reason for. You don't know, and I don't know, and nobody else knows either. I'm going to tell you. Okay. Now, concerning my third question, which was, what sort of thing is a reason to act? I think of a reason to act as a consideration which favors or counts in favor of acting in that way. I don't know, is there a French word, favoriser? A reason is a consideration that favorise acting in a certain way. Now, what stands on the left-hand side of that? What does the favoring? Could it be a motor car? No, they can't favor anything. I say a state of affairs. Some state of affairs favors responding in a certain way, counts in favor of. So there are reasons for acting, and we act for reasons. Is it the same sort of for in each case? Presumably not. The reason in reasons for acting, it's the acting that's on the right-hand side. When we act for reasons, the reasons are on the right-hand side. That's an obvious difference. So we should be careful about these prepositions and the sort of for that we're dealing with. Can you act for a reason that doesn't exist, that is no reason? A bad reason. Are there any bad reasons? Or are they just not reasons at all? You might act in the light of a consideration which would be a reason if it were so. But it's not so. So there is no such reason. You can, of course, do something that you have absolutely no reason to do. For instance, breathe a specific number of times before the end of this talk. You will do that, whatever that number is, but you have no reason to do it. In fact, you probably couldn't do it on purpose. So 5. My third question, what sort of thing is a reason to act? Reason for action, reason for belief means the same in English as reason for acting or reason for believing, and reason to act. So we have for action, for acting, reason to act. They all mean the same thing, according to me. But which expression is the most revealing metaphysically? Well, my view is that the for bit is the best one to think about. A reason for action, rather than the to. A reason for acting in a certain way is a consideration that favors or counts in favor of acting or responding in that way. And the for here, the reason for acting, that's a normative notion. It's a pour as opposed to a contre. Now, we have reasons for acting. We have reasons to act in this way rather than that. How can we explain the existence of such a reason? Well, one obvious answer is by finding some value that is operating here, some value that such an action or so acting would have or create. Perhaps the value is to be found in the consequences of the action. It can be found in the thing done, or just in the doing of it. Sometimes the reason to do something lies not in what you will achieve, it's in the attempt. So you might say, acting in that way has intrinsic value independently of any result. And that's the reason to act lies in the action itself, not in the consequences. So a reason is a consideration that favors responding in a certain way, and we explain that favoring by finding some value that such an action, so acting, would have or generate. So that's one way in which you might explain a reason for action. And that's a very appealing idea. These reasons are based in values, but nothing guarantees that this is the only way of explaining a reason. For instance, what explains why something is a reason to believe? Are we to explain those by appeal to the value of believing truly? It's not obvious that that would be the right way to go. Why is the fact that it's Wednesday a reason to believe that it's Wednesday? You might say, because it's Wednesday. That isn't an answer to the question.
Unless we are more.
We aren't more. Even then, I think more faced with this question would admit that the truth of a belief cannot be a reason for believing it.
Okay.
All right. Where have I got to? 5. Yeah. I've talked happily about considerations, which is a long word. I've done that bit. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So what sort of thing then is a consideration? That's a perfectly good French word, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Consideration. Mm-hmm. What sort of thing is that? This is metaphysics. We're doing metaphysics here. We ask what sort of thing we're dealing with. Well, a consideration sounds as if it's a linguistic item, but I don't think that could be right. True considerations are just facts. They're more like considerables than things actually considered. So I would say only things that are the case, things that are so, can be reasons to do anything. Notice that being the case is not the same as being true. Is this up there somewhere? Yes. Now, of course, we often act in the light of a misconception, a misapprehension. Misapprehension. I can act for the reason that P when it's not the case that P. The reason for which I acted, my reason was that P. There was no such thing as that P, as it happened, because I was wrong. There was nothing there. Still, one can act for a reason, in that sense, one can act for a reason that is not the case. But all good reasons must be the case. Considerations which are not the case have no metaphysical status and cannot favor anything. They cannot be reasons to do something, but they can still be the reasons for which we do things, and are when we make mistakes and act in the light of the mistakes we make. The most we can say is that this would have been a reason if it had been so, if it had been the case. And we can't always say that. In a really bad case, the reason for which we act is something which would not have been a reason for so acting, even if it had been the case. So we cannot understand reasons for which, les raisons pour lesquelles, directly in terms of reasons for, raison pour agir. We've got two different fors here, reason for which and reason for acting. They're not the same for. Pour. Mm-hmm. So, we should tell the same story about reasons for action as about reasons for belief. The differences between action and belief are significant, but they don't matter here. Then they don't impinge. Accepting that I have underestimated her, je l'ai sous-estimée, is an action of mine. I can do it, even though it amounts to no more than ceasing to believe one thing and coming to believe another. I said that the explanation of reasons for action normally appeals to the value of so acting, but the explanation of reasons for believing does not normally appeal to the value of so believing. Generally speaking, reasons for believing that P are reasons that raise the probability that P. Unlike reasons for acting, which don't raise the probability of anything. That could be an overgeneralization. Mm-hmm. So now let's go back to the idea of reasons for which we act, practical reasons, as they're sometimes called. Here's a famous view. The reasons for which an agent acts are mental states of that agent, beliefs and desires. It's our beliefs and desires that explain why we do what we do, and those beliefs and desires are our reasons for doing what we do. Now, we might say this because if we think we're motivated. What are we motivated by? Desires. And perhaps also by beliefs or by belief-desire combinations. Now, this is a theory of motivation, and it's known as Humeanism in the theory of reasons, after the Scottish philosopher David Hume. But the theory is false, and I would say obviously false, for two reasons. First, to desire is to be motivated. So desire cannot be what motivates. Something else must be doing it. That's an argument, or supposed to be. What motivates is not a desire, it's more like a prospect, which I desire, no doubt, but I'm motivated by the prospect of having shorter hair. Not in my case, as you may notice, but one might be in other. Now, what's a prospect? If I do this, things will improve. Well, prospects are not beliefs either. Though we cannot be motivated by a prospect if we don't believe it. But what motivates us is not the believing, it's the prospect. Also, what motivates me can be a fact about the past rather than about the future. So we're not always dealing with prospects. So that's one reason why I don't accept Humeanism in the theory of motivation. The second reason why the theory is false is that it entails that most good reasons to act cannot be the reasons for which we act. That she is in trouble and needs help can be the reason for which I help. But Humeanism maintains that is impossible. Humean maintains all my reasons consist in my own mental states, my own beliefs and desires. That she is in trouble and needs help is not a mental state of mine, but it can motivate. The Humean maintains, therefore, that I cannot act for that reason. Really, we need a distinction between a reason for which one helps and a reason why one helps. Our own psychological states may explain why we help. I did believe she was in trouble, and that is part of the explanation of why I helped. But it need not therefore be the reason for which I helped. The reason for which I helped is where it looks through my own mental states to the things I'm focusing on, namely that she's in trouble. That's the reason that I'm helping. A more probable but still false view says, yes, desires are not reasons to act, but they are the reasons for which we act. This view has the advantage that when asked why someone acted, we can always start, she wanted, ... But it may be that her reason was what she wanted, that it would make her rich, not that she wanted this. Those are different reasons. It's one thing to act for the reason that it will make you rich. Another thing to act for the reason that you want to be rich. Those are distinct possibilities. The explanation of the action should be the same as the explanation of the motivation. We don't necessarily achieve the latter, namely explaining a motivation, just by mentioning the motivation, the desire. We want to know why that desire is there. And we often get the answer to that question by finding out what was desired and why. So there's always the question, why want that? Even if normally the answer is perfectly obvious. In fact, there's no difference between desire and motivation. They are the same thing. Motivation understood as motivatedness rather than as what motivates. To desire is to be motivated. Desire cannot also be what motivates. That's a simple metaphysical argument. So desire cannot be the reason for which we act. So I conclude desires can't be the reasons for which we act. The reason for which we act cannot be that we are motivated to achieve some end. And this is just as well, because one response to motivation is not to try to satisfy it, but to try to silence it. So if I'm acting because I'm motivated in a certain way and I'm ashamed of that, and I'm trying to change myself, that I am so motivated is not exactly my reason for action. My reason for which I'm acting is that I want not to be motivated that way, or so as to cease to be motivated. Here's a very different suggestion. The reasons for which we act and believe are not matters of fact, they are propositions. This is a different metaphysical suggestion. The reason for which I act can be this proposition, that acting in this way will get me what I want. That's a proposition. It could be true. So this is helped by the idea that propositions can be true or false, just like the reasons for which I act. But unlike reasons to act, which have all got to be true. Something that is not the case cannot be a reason to do anything. But there's a distinction here between being true and being the case. It may be that the things that are capable of being true, like a sentence, are not capable of being so, of being the case. How things are is a different question from the question which things are true. Though we decide the latter, maybe by deciding the former. Statements and other representations can be true, as when we speak of a portrait as being a true likeness. But they cannot be the case or be so. Not being so is not the same as being false. They're different failures. Though when it's not the case that P, there is something that is false, namely the sentence P. And we can also say that it's not true that P, roughly it is false that P, though being true is not the same as being the case. Finally, I come to the hardest issue of all. What is the nature of that for which we have a reason? Standard answer, belief, desire, intention, or action, of course. Reasons are reasons for responses, and these different responses, belief, desire, intention, action, are the responses which the reasons are reasons for. I've written here, can one love someone for a reason? If not, why not? Perhaps love doesn't work that way. when we have a reason to respond, it is always a reason to respond in a certain way. So what is this respond in a certain way? What is the metaphysics here? What lies on the right? What is the object that lies on the right-hand side of the reason relation when I respond for a reason? I have the reason before I respond. The reason is there, fully set up before I respond to it, and whether I respond to it or not. There are many different responses I could have made, all of which might have been of the right type. Being the sort of response that the reason was calling for. So reasons don't call for particular responses, they call for types of responding in a way, a type of response. When I ought to give the money back, there is no particular action that is my duty. There are many actions, each of which would have been good enough, would have counted as doing my duty, doing what I ought. So there's no one action which is what I ought. Any of a variety of actions will do. I ought to do not what I ought, but I ought to act as I ought. But there's no such object as I ought, even though there might have been for what I ought. Now, I think this is a really serious problem because I don't know what it is that the reason favors when it favors not a particular action, but simply acting in a certain way. I don't know the nature of that object that's supposed to stand on the right-hand side of the reasons relation. When I have acted, then I suppose if I do act as I should, then I have done, as we say, what I ought. But actually, I haven't done the action which I ought to have done. I've acted as I ought. So the favoring relation does not take you to an object. It takes you to a way of acting. You can't suppose that what you ought to do is a type of action. It's better to say what I ought to do is an action of a certain type. Any action of a certain type will do of that type. So what is favored by the favoring, by the thing that does the favoring, by the reason? What is the right-hand side of this relation? I don't know. And I don't know anybody else who knows. And I don't think anybody has noticed this problem. I used to think that Harold Pritchard, who I very deeply respect, had noticed it, but I decided he didn't by reading letters in the Oxford Library that he wrote to his friend Ross. So I've been doing historical investigation about that. The real point is not who got there first or anything, but what is it? What is the right, metaphysically speaking, what is it that lies on the right-hand side of the reasons relation? You cannot just say an action, a belief, an intention. Because metaphysically speaking, there isn't one of those yet. There's just a blank. So the reason relation is not a relation between an object on the left and an object on the right. There's an object on the left, which is a need for help, whatever it is, favors or is a reason for what? What sort of thing do we put here on the right? we want to say acting in a certain way, and that isn't a metaphysical object. And you can't distribute it, I don't think, saying it favors each action of that sort equally. Because it doesn't seem to need to go down to the bottom like that. It stays at the level of generality. It's true to say that a reason is a reason to act in a certain way, and false to say that a reason is a reason for some particular act which you are about to do. So the metaphysics of the reasons relation, of this reasons relation, is one that seems to me as yet completely unaddressed. And I'm not going to tell you how to address it because I don't know. All I know is that, like many other people, all my life I've been saying something which I can't now defend. Namely, that a reason is a reason for action. Or for responding. It's not that bad, but it isn't sufficiently precise for careful thinking. We need to look again at the way in which any of a range of responses is good enough to satisfy the reason. And to make sense, if we can, of the idea that a reason is a reason to respond in a certain way, without supposing that that can be made sense of simply as by doing the action the reason wants us to do. There isn't any such action. And that's all I have to say. Thank you for listening to me.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for this. So I didn't expect that you were going to share really the research that belongs to something that you are really troubled with right now. So this is a great sign of trust. Thank you for not showing something ready-made, but of thank you for sharing something that is essential.
Well, it's like scratching an itch.
Wonderful.
I mean, the reason why I wanted to talk about this, I've only recently noticed this problem. And it's disconcerting, having spent all my life writing books about reasons, and finding I don't know what I'm talking about.
Okay, this is even more precious. Thank you so much. I'll have many questions, but probably the audience also has. And please, people online, do not hesitate to ask, to raise your hands and then ask your questions. I see that Cyril has something to say, so please do.
Just a point. When say I predict that she will be happy.
Sorry, Cyril, I have to give you. And I just hear it unless you can. I'll have to look for the mic somewhere else. Could you come closer to the? Yeah. Please. What is the problem?
So the last point was about the fact that there is some multiple realizability.
Yeah.
Actions of certain type. But I think this kind of multiple realizability may be present in other cases. When you predict something, actually, I predict it will be the weather will be good tomorrow. It may be, I predict something that may be realized in many different ways. So the question is, why is there a difference between what you're describing and this type of multiple realizability?
Okay, good. It's as if the reason is a perfectly good reason for each of those responses one by one. but it somehow catches them all at once. When you do respond as you respond, when your particular action, you have acted as you had a reason to act. Your reason was it among other things, a reason for this one and for each other one? Or did it somehow capture them all at once? Evidently, when you do act, you have acted for a reason. And you can tell me what your reason was. That's fine. But if we're interested in the reason that you noticed yesterday and that today you satisfy, it cannot be that the action you did was the one that the reason for doing which you noticed yesterday. That reason, if you like, applied to all the other ways you could have done it. When there is a particular, then there is a particular. When you have done it, we can say, yes, you acted as you had reason to act, but not you did what you had reason to do, if you hear that in a certain way. I don't think I change the nature of the reason by acting, as I would have to if the nature of the reason for which I act is determined by, partly constituted by, my response. You can see what I'm trying to do.
Okay, so there are two questions online, but I'll just give a tiny priority to the room. So Robert, first, and then two questions from online.
No question. Yes, questions. The first one is the notion of justification does not appear at all. Is there a reason for not using it? And my second question is that also there is a question of the reason not to act and the reason not to believe. Do you think that it works the same or not?
Okay. What's going on? A reason not to act. You might say there are no instances of that, of not acting. Because if you don't do anything, as it were, there's no difference between another one.
We can say he did nothing.
He didn't.
He had a reason for not
doing anything. He had a reason for not doing anything. Yes. There are many different ways of not doing anything. And he had a reason to do one of those, as it were. Didn't matter which. But that's like the positive case. So if the argument works for the positive case, it should work for the negative case. And it does seem to me that it does work for the negative case, because there are many different ways of not doing something.
about justification.
Justification. Ask the question again.
Well, the notion of justification has not appeared.
No, no, it didn't. And you think it perhaps could have done? You think it could have?
I'm very happy that it was.
Okay, I mean,
no appearance.
No, okay.
This notion, but why? Because generally people are interested in this notion of justification.
Yeah, well,
You are not.
No, I mean, I did write an epistemology book at one point, and I'm sure there was plenty about justification in there, but that was 50 years ago. I'm much more interested in reasons now. there are many forms of justification that are not to do with reasons. So it might be that what justified him in doing what he did was that he was not aware of something. No, that would be his defense. So I'm keen to keep justification out of this for a while. It seems to me, it's a notion of its own. The other thing is, I suppose, that
I think that justification is coming from the future, and it doesn't do the job that it is necessarily a post factum thing, and this is not what interests you, right?
Well, I mean, thank you for the thought, but one might say, what would justify my doing this? What reason could there be for? It's true. I mean, as I hear the word justification nowadays, I seem to hear it as what after the event puts me in the right of things.
Exactly.
Whereas the reason was, if you like, there before the event, or
yes, but it seems to me that very often if someone say what justify your belief is asking you your reason.
That's one way of answering it. Yeah. But also you can justify it by saying, I didn't notice something. So there are other forms of justification. They use reasons, good reasons. They produce explanations, but not reasons. That's what I meant by saying justification is putting yourself in the right of it, or escaping criticism. Whereas moral justification yeah.
But moral justification is a question only when there is a mistake, right? You don't need a moral justification when you helped me to do something.
Well, that was what I was thinking. Yeah, as it were, if I, there you see someone helping the little old lady across the road, and you say, what justifies your doing that?
Yeah.
They might say, I don't think I need much justification.
But there is there are other kind of questions like what justifies the fact that you eat meat?
Yes.
Sorry. I'm just
yeah. Let me just say one more thing about this. In a way, the thrust of there's a hard edge in your question. This is a good question, thank you. It comes from the fact that for a long time, epistemology was done in theory of justification. And moral philosophy was not. It was much more done in the theory of obligation and reasons and things like that. So in a way, as I was hearing your question, it was coming from epistemology rather than from ethics. And of course, that isn't a justification for me to avoid answering it, but it's interesting that there is this slight failure to connect here, not between you and me, but between the two parts of the subject.
Okay, super interesting. Thank you so much. François, the floor is yours. François,
yeah, so first of all, thanks a lot for the talk. So I have a very naive question, and I hope it has not already been asked because I did not hear exactly everything that was asked. But basically, I think I would like to know a little bit more about how you see the constraints on the answer to the last problem that you raised. You say you don't have an answer to the last issue that you raised, namely when we talk about a reason to do X, what sort of X can it be? But I take it that you have at least an idea of the constraints that bear on the answers that we should find. And I would like to know a bit more about that, because if I understand correctly, you said, well, when we talk of a reason to do X, it cannot be a particular action, because in most cases, many actions could be as I ought to do, like could be the action that like satisfies, so to speak, what I ought to do. It cannot also be a type of action, because it's just weird to say that a reason favors a type. So I would like, could you say more about what sort of constraint do you see? Like, does it need to be that the X that I have a reason to do must be a fully determined object, or could it be a partially undetermined object? I don't know. I think I would like to know more about how you see the constraints. Obviously, you have some constraints, although you don't know exactly what satisfies them all. Yeah, if you could say more, it would be very interesting.
Okay, but I mean, in a way, the worry is that it may not be an object at all, rather than fully or partially constrained. If it's an object, it's already, set up. It's determined. But we know that our reasons don't come with sort of fully set up responses that are just waiting for us to do them. The reason, in a way, imposes restraints on our freedom of movement. It's not quite right, but you see what I mean by that. The reason is trying to get you to act within certain limitations. But maybe that's all you can say. You've got to act in some feeding the cat way before midnight or something. Now, when you do feed the cat before midnight, there you can say, you can't say I have done what I ought. You can only say I have acted as I ought. Well, I'm just going to go through my stuff now. I'm up and running. There was no sense in which my reason was a reason to do this cat feeding rather than that cat feeding. Any one of them is equally and perfectly good. But the metaphysics now has got peculiar, because we've lost our sense that the reason is a reason to do an action. Since there isn't any action, oh, it sounds terrible. There isn't, I'll say it, there isn't any action of which I could say, this was what the reason required of me. That's about the best I can do at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, and thanks a lot. Yeah.
I mean, that was you're right to press that sort of question. It's no, okay, enough.
That's super interesting. So I'll give the floor to people who just raised their hands in the virtual room, but I would like to know whether, yeah, there is Manuel. So first, sorry, people around here. But let me say before giving you the floor that please, students, you know that you have this particular situation where you can ask silly questions without being frowned upon. Questions that we are ashamed of us, like some detailed question that I would not ask because I'm adult and I should have understood that. So you have the right to do it instead of us. We're not going to do that.
Maybe I would be ashamed of my question. It would depend on your answer.
No, carry on.
Yes, it's also about your last slide and the difficult issue in your approach. It's made me think about intentional transitive verbs.
Yeah.
Like seek, work, hate. Because then there are particular logical properties. You don't have substitutability of identicals, possibly non-existent objects, and double reading between definite and indefinite objects. So isn't it interesting for your question?
I mean, yes, I think this is part of a larger family of issues in the philosophy of mind, as it were. So I don't by any means think of it as a special, corner of moral philosophy or something like that. But I also, I mean, I think of it, I came to it through thinking about the normative. And these are normative constraints on action. No, there are other sorts of constraints on action, like physical constraints, but they're, it's a different kind of constraints. So normative constraints are interesting. I didn't in any way think that I suppose what I want to say, one thing I know I want to say is that the things you mentioned, your original list, I'm all up for that. And it doesn't seem to me, it's like finding companions in guilt rather than helping you get out of prison.
But then doesn't it have an impact on your approach? Because if we think about, for instance, worship, the verb of worship, to worship, then that verb can't denote any true metaphysical relations, since in many cases you don't have two relate, but only one receive the subject with no real existing objects.
You mean well, this is
So it was only your favors.
yeah.
The reason that favors something.
Yes.
You're wondering about the nature,
yeah.
the nature of the thing, but then that favor really denotes a relation.
Once you've acted, then you acted as you had reason to. The way in which you acted. I must try and put this right. Your action was of a sort that was favored by the reason. I mean, this is already difficult to say because it sounds a bit silly, but in a sense, what the reason does, it's a constraint. It says you're only allowed to go on if you jump through this hoop. If you play, if you don't act in breach of this constraint. Now, that reason is already complete before you act. You don't make it complete by acting. But it doesn't pick out any of the responses that you might make in satisfying. I mean, we agree with that. Right, so that's a sort of basic situation. So now ask your question again.
So maybe I took the example of worship, but
No.
I would try another number to seek or
Seek.
search.
What are you looking for?
What you're looking for? I'm seeking a cat.
I'm looking for
I'm looking for a cat, or maybe any cat will do the job. So I have no specific cats
No.
I am related to. And that's, of course, if I'm looking for cats, there are constraints on the objects I have to find. And if I find a cat, then that will be one specific particular cat. And then to find might denote true relation, but to look for is more problematic.
It's easier to look for a cat than to find one. It's easier to look for a cat than to find one. I mean, I don't see any relevant difference between looking for a cat and finding one, actually, in this respect. Any looking for is good enough, and any finding is good enough. Sort of the non-particularity of that which you are told to do by the reason. Is, I mean, firstly, essential and exactly the thing I don't understand.
Well, in what sense what you are saying is a response to the worry that Jonathan framed?
Not sure if
In what sense your story about the cat is a response to the worry that Jonathan expressed?
It might be a similar.
Yeah, that's what he's after.
To look for does not denote a relation.
It's interestingly, there's well, I'd say,
you could have many questions about what is the metaphysical nature of the objects we are looking for, but in many cases you don't have any specific object, you just have you see a kind of object you're looking for the cat. And it seems to me to be similar to the issue about actions.
But is it independent from the fact that you look for a cat because you are lonely and you would like to find a cat to have a company, or you look for a cat because you still have some cat food and you wouldn't like to throw it away? So any cat would do to get rid of the food. So there is no one metaphysics that could be found behind all those reasons, I think. No?
That's, I think, what he's saying, really.
Okay. Okay. Sorry.
That there's there are these important similarities, that there is a range of ways to satisfy whatever it is we're trying to satisfy, and this is a companions in guilt move. I mean, I'm suspicious of this still, but I'm not managing to put my finger on why. So thank you.
You go. He has already the thing. Yeah. Please go on.
Yes, so
You have to switch it on. Yeah.
right, yeah. I'm sorry if I missed something, but you were looking for an X in the or a general X in the relationship. Y is a reason to X. And you seem to avoid or not consider the term behavior. And I wondered why, because reasons for acting and using act as a global category here didn't seem very promising, but behaviors are typically responses. They include the notion of doing things in a certain way, which you were looking for. They may or may not overdetermine exact actions. For example, you may behave shocked in general, and you may have reasons for behaving quite shocked if someone does something completely awful to you, or you may have reasons for for acting in a more specific way, which may be called a behavior. And it seems that behaviors in some way might also, that this notion might also apply to beliefs and to ways of believing is something. I believe in God in a different way than I believe in the weather tomorrow or something like that. And I wonder why we didn't consider this time. I mean, if there is a specific reason for that.
Well, actually, it sounds to me this is more companions in guilt. All that it's what I say, if true, is going to be true about reasons to believe as much as it is true of reasons to act. So we don't particularize the believing by the thing believed. A reason to believe is a reason to respond in a certain way to certain evidence. And okay, there's a proposition involved, you know, that he did the deed, or but the believing is as much believing in a way as acting in a way was. There isn't any particular believing which is the believing favored by the reason to believe.
Yeah, but then can all those be reasons to behave?
Yeah, that could be so. I mean, reason to respond. Let's say every reason. Here's a general remark about reasons. Reasons are reasons that favor responses. Yeah, I mean, it's all, you know, empty formulation, but nonetheless, you know, you can respond to reasons. It's a reason to worry, to wonder, to hope, to fear, and so on. Now, in all these cases, the little phrase "in a way" gets itself in. And once it's in, it's very hard to get it out again. And yet we don't easily have we don't have a good metaphysical, at least my worry was, and still is, that we don't have a good metaphysical way of capturing the sort of the spread of the reason. We had thought we got hold of this by talking about a reason to give the money back. You know, there's the response is giving the money back, but we know perfectly well that the reason does not particularize the response that it is trying to get out of you. If you see what I mean by that.
Yeah.
Now that applies to belief, to hope, to fear, to want, to and so on. It looks like it's a general worry about how to characterize the nature of these very basic normative relationships. And I don't see that, although I did it in terms of reasons for action, that thinking about reasons for belief actually changes the real problems, though it does, of course, well, it reminds us how similar reasons to belief are to reasons to act. Perhaps. Yeah, I mean, that's well,
Okay, wonderful.
Best I could do. Sorry.
Thanks so much for the, I'll give you the floor in a few seconds because there's so many people online. Victoria, please ask your question. Wonderful.
Thank you, Jonathan. And thank you for your epistemology book, which I studied a few years ago. Anyway,
good. Yeah.
I'd like to make a suggestion about how to resolve this worry about reasons being calling for types, and there being something about we don't have the reason now, but it seems to be in the future. And this is to adopt a kind of pragmatic modal realism. So we say that the reason is a kind of modal general under which our actions are possibilities. So if I want to go out and it's raining, I could put a coat with the hood on, perhaps, or I could take an umbrella, or I could put a hat on, and these all satisfy that reason because they are possibilities that fall under this general. And similarly, with the worry that it's something about something in the future, which is our reason for acting now, we could say that when I act now, I am exploiting a kind of modal affordance that is present in my environment now, even though that only seems to give me a reason later on, but it is there now. Though I understand you may not like that if you don't like the idea of modal types.
Actually, I don't have any such sophisticated position
Oh, right.
to fall back on. And I just don't see how that helps, though. Can you explain why you think that is going to help this puzzle?
Because I think you don't need, because if you accept that if you think types are metaphysically just as respectable as particulars, as tokens, then you can act for reasons which are types as well as acting for reasons that are particular. So you don't.
Okay, the problem was not that the reason was a type, it was the nature of that which it favors or calls for, or whatever metaphor we use. It's the right-hand side that look, a reason is a consideration that favors responding in a certain way. That's sort of that's how I talk. And I got stuck on the responding in a certain way bit. And that, that's the basic, that's what's happening there. Now,
Okay. Yeah.
I don't understand how the various sort of devices you were offering us are actually helping in this respect.
I'm afraid that we cannot develop this topic that much, in the sense that we have so many questions. One more question online, and please do write to Jonathan if you have a ready-made solution for his problems.
Yeah, right, and please do.
I think that he would be grateful. So one question from online, Stephen.
Hi. Sorry. Hello.
Hello.
My question, well, I actually have two questions, but I'll just stick with one. So the problem is that it doesn't pick out a particular action or a particular attitude. And I was wondering why you don't appeal to fittingness. Maybe fittingness would somehow get you further into a lower level, because I mean the original ethical intuitionists, they didn't talk about reasons, they talk about fittingness. So I was wondering if it might somehow help here.
Yeah, but I fittingness doesn't pick out a response either. It just says among the fitting responses. So if I said, reason is a reason that limits you to fitting responses, any one of which is fine. That seems to me, pretty much the way I was laying out the problem in the beginning, rather than a solution to it.
Well, what about the other way? Why can't it be, the fittingness goes the other way? It's something is a reason only if it's fitting, right? I mean, you could have.
No, I won't let you have that. The thing that's fitting is the response, not the reason.
Okay, thank you.
Francois, very quickly, your question?
Yes, I do have a question. So yeah, thank you for the talk. Very interesting. I am afraid I'm not going to try to help you solve your problem, but I was intrigued by your suggestion that the reasons that a certain consideration is a reason to believe is entirely different than the reason that a certain consideration is a reason to act. So I was wondering what you would think of the following suggestion. So as you said, a consideration is a reason to form a certain belief B if it raises the probability that B is true. And I was thinking maybe a consideration is a reason to perform a certain act A if it raises the probability that A is right. And so in both cases, one might think that a consideration is a reason to phi, just in case it raises the probability that phi is fitting. And the only difference is that appropriate or fittingness consists in truth in the case of beliefs, whereas it consists in rightness in the case of acts.
Yeah. Okay, I think if I were you, I would make the point in terms of bestness rather than rightness, because we don't want to limit this to the moral case.
Yeah, right.
So a reason is a consideration which is a ground for value in responding in certain ways. So the reason, you might say, is what makes responding in a certain way better in a respect. Yeah, I think what I think about that is that these are not the same fact. One might be the ground for the other. So it may be that facts about reasons are grounded in facts about values of some sort like the one you mentioned. But they're not the same facts. And that's partly because I distinguish between the normative and the evaluative quite sort of strictly. And I think what you've done is move from one to the other in the hope of enlightenment. And I'm not convinced I wish, at least yet, to allow you that.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for these questions. We are going back to the room for a second. Please, the floor is yours.
It's just very timely that I asked a follow-up question regarding probability. Do you think that we could construct eventually a system of reasons incorporating probability so that it could cover the questions, for example, what you raised in the beginning, that how many degrees that you do until the end of the talk, which doesn't really have a reason, but it follows statistic rules, and also the reason not to do something, so that we define, for example, the reason. Let's say we have a reason, and then the probability to act will be p, and then the probability to not act would be 1 minus p. Then we it does not tell exactly whether we act or not, and then let's say taking a similar method as what we use in physics, in simulated dynamics, for example, we can kind of construct a whole system with, let's say, the definition of a basic relationship and reduction of a random factor.
No, okay. I mean, I don't wish to go that way. I mean, a reason to act is not a consideration that raises the probability of anything. A reason to believe might be a consideration that raises the probability of that which you are to believe. But a reason to act is not a consideration that raises the probability that you're going to act. It just doesn't seem to me to be in that business at all. I mean, what it does is it confers some value on so acting. But for instance, you know, I don't know, you have many reasons you know nothing about. You're never going to know anything about them. They surely don't, they're there, but they're not going to, they're not in the business of raising the probability that you're going to act.
Then it comes back to the question of, let's say, physics, that you think that you do something, you give a force, and then there will be a fixed, very well determined response.
Yeah.
And it comes extension, whether you think, let's say, in the case of multiple reasons for doing something, yeah, and the relationship between these multiple reasons is an addition in scalar term, or is a vector, let's say, in different dimensions of reasons. So the different reasons, they are in different dimensions, or they are in the scalar form that you can add up to each other. Let's say then it really becomes stronger to let me do something. Yeah, then I will do something for that.
Okay, I mean, I don't think it, the honest truth is I don't think in these terms at all. My basic view about a reason is that a reason is a consideration which in the practical case is explained in terms of values, but in the theoretical case not. In the theoretical case, it's explained in terms of probabilities, but I'm doing practical matters here. And I don't think that the force of a practical reason has anything to do with these vectors. I'm afraid.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for this. Wow, exactly something I was waiting for. A student's question that is going to make all clear now. And the floor is yours.
So I have a question. I know you said that desire cannot be driven by the art, but I just didn't understand how can desire not be the reason of which we act? Because we know that there is a certain purpose when we act. When we want something, it's because we have this desire to get this thing. It just burns inside ourselves, and we are determined by it because it is part of our nature. And what we want is superficial, and it's not part of our nature. So it can't be the reason why we act. The reason why we want can't be what it is outside, but inside of ourselves. So this is why I don't really understand how can desire not be the reason why we act.
Well,
In two phrases.
It's a very brave question. The desire explains the action, but it isn't itself the reason for doing it. The reason for doing it is the reason to want to do it. So, I mean, try to think of it this way. To desire is to be motivated. Desire is motivation. If you desire it more, you are more motivated to do it. If you desire it less, you're less motivated to do it. The reason to do it is the reason to when you notice the reason, you become motivated. But the reason itself isn't motivation, it's what motivates you. Now, desire isn't what motivates you, it's your being motivated. So although they're both part of the motivational story, the reason bit is not the motivation, which is desire, it's the reason for being motivated. So it's separate, it comes first, as it were. So the reason tries to get you to do the action by getting you to be motivated to do it. You spot the reason, you become motivated, the moment comes, you do it. That's my story, as it were. But the reason is not a reason to be motivated, it's a reason to do it. And you are motivated by that reason. That's the way I try to tell the story. Right. So I've got, you're working with the same players in a way, but I have them slightly differently shaped with relation to each other. If I ask, why did she do it? You say, she was motivated. So I haven't learned anything yet. What I want to know is what motivated her. So what motivated her was what she took to be a reason to do it. The focus of the reason is not on being motivated, it's on doing. Of course, you won't do it unless you're motivated. I might recognize a reason and not be motivated at all by it, perhaps because I'm too busy or some other. The strength of a reason is not the same thing as the amount of motivation it generates. Because after all, we know that you might not be motivated enough by a very good reason and too much by a very bad reason, by a weak reason. We have the reason on the left-hand side. We have motivation, which lies in between the reason and action. I think
and think about the deepness of, if you are in love with someone, about the deepness of your feeling. Does it make sense to even think about the deepness of this feeling if you exclude the person in question out of the picture? It doesn't make sense, even though the deepness is about your feeling. Still, the meaning of the whole story disappears if the person does not exist. If you learn that finally the person you were in love with, for example, during the online chats, etc., this person is an artificial intelligence. There is the reason for you to love disappears. So there is an apparent strength in interiority, but as many of us think in this room, I think interiority is a secondary product of the external world on our brain. You don't think so? This is what the Thomists and Aristotelians in this room think, against some kind, yeah. Okay, wonderful. Sorry.
That's fine.
Please, people online, quick questions because we are done actually. So please be straightforward and easy if possible. Bob or whomever. Yeah, Bob, the floor is yours.
Hi there. I wonder if this problem about what reasons really are might be something we could get at by thinking a bit more about the connections, or apparent connections, between beliefs or actions and reasons. I mean, as you say, we use metaphors, favor, fall for, all this sort of stuff. Nobody ever cashes these metaphors out. And I wonder if it might be something worth thinking about. What would this look like if we in some way could cash those metaphors out and be a bit more literal rather than metaphorical? Not that I've got any ideas about it myself. Cheers.
Well, look, I mean, yes, in a way, part of the problem here is that we're being pushed around by certain expressions which are metaphorical in a way. We start with reasons and then we get favoring, and also favoring really it can only be done by people.
Right.
We distort our verbs in order to try to make progress. But I mean, though that's a pious hope, I'm not sure that it gives us any route to safety.
No, I was probably being over optimistic.
If there is a problem here, it requires kind of reshaping of concepts that philosophers are supposed to be, the sort of stuff we do a bit. We only got to do it a little bit, and then it's like carpentry; it'll go into the box. And that's what I think.
Okay, thank you so much, John. The floor is yours for the last question online, and we are going back to the room too.
You're in.
You're in. We see you, John.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you very much for the talk. I'll apologize in advance if this question's a bit naive. But why can't we simply say that the right-hand side of a reason for acting is a set of actions that equally count as acting in the relevant way?
That's a nice short question. Thank you.
Yeah, all right. It's very hard to favor a set.
Nice short answer. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Leah, a short question, please. I saw that your hand was up before.
Oh, hi, sorry. Yes, well, I'm going to press you on this one because I had the same question as John, actually. So you say it's really hard to favor a set, but, you know, I don't know, the fact that it's going to rain might count as a reason to take an umbrella or like to dance in the rain if I like, you know, dancing in the rain, or to take my car instead of walking somewhere. And usually we don't have a problem with that, right? We say that the fact that it's raining is a reason for all these things.
That's the thing to explain. That's what we're after. Yep.
But so it is possible to say that something is a reason for a set of actions.
Well, we say it all the time, but my worry is that when you actually start thinking about it more carefully, it begins to fall apart. You have either to try to favor each of the actions severally, or all of them together somehow. And it seems to me pretty clear that the reason favors them all together, really. And the way in which we express that is by saying that it favors acting in a certain way, where the certain way bit is the grouping.
So sorry, very briefly, is your worry, so it depends on how you individuate action, right? So for instance, the fact that the cat is hungry and I care about its health or something like that. Mm-hmm. So you say, we can't say that it's a reason to feed the cat because, you know, you could feed the cat that way or you feed the cat that other way. But it depends on how you individuate, right? Surely, if you feed the cat with exactly that many biscuits or with one biscuit less or something like that, it feels like we're a bit like nitpicky here.
Yes, I'm quite in favor of nitpicking some of the time, but I'm not trying to be super clever here. It isn't a matter of, it's a question of not being fooled by the forms of language into thinking you've got an answer when you haven't. You know, somehow or other, the reason collects together all the possible responses in one and says, as a reason, it doesn't instruct you to do that, but it encourages you, shall we say, to, as we say, act in that way or do one of those. Now, it doesn't mind which you do, as long as you do one. And it's only a reason anyway. It's not an ought. So what the reason seems to do is make sure that you're, well, not even that's an instruction. The reason is trying to get you to make sure that whatever else is true of it, your action is of a certain sort.
Thank you. Just say it's a very helpful way of putting it, actually, saying that a reason is something that collects together a set of actions, and we don't really know how. I think it's very helpful. Thanks.